I am Simon the Cyrenian, the father of Alexander and Rufus. Many people do not know who I am, but I have an experience I must tell. I was a witness. It all started this way. As I entered the city, I met a large crowd. People were going wild, pushing, shoving, and screaming to the top of their lungs. Oh, I thought a riot had broken out. The soldiers could not control this taunting, repulsive crowd. Why, even the Jewish leaders and some of the soldiers seemed out of control. I worked my way closer to where the crowd was, and then for the first time, I realized it was not a riot, but what appeared to be a crucifixion that was about to take place. I was getting pushed and shoved, and at times I feared for my own safety. I pressed forward because somehow inside I felt compelled to see who this individual was. And then I saw him. He was badly bruised and beaten. There were open wounds on his back where the guards had whipped him. There was dried blood on his forehead and his face, caused by a crown of thorns. His body was soaked with sweat. It was plain to see that he was weary. He was totally exhausted, and his body racked with pain. Well, I quickly turned to the man standing next to me and said, "He must have committed a hideous crime. What did he do?" The man replied, "Oh, he blasphemed against God. He claimed to be the Messiah. He claimed to be the Anointed One." I turned my attention back to the man. The crowd continued to jeer him, and the soldiers were beating him and roughly pushing him forward. Then I saw his knees buckle, and the crowd cheered as he went down. He collapsed underneath the load of the cross. Oh, for a moment I thought he was dead. But he wasn't. I saw him agonizingly try to get up. I almost cried out, "Why? Why doesn't someone help him?" The next thing I knew, I became the center of attention. A big soldier grabbed me from the crowd and ordered me, Simon, to carry the cross. Even though I had compassion for this man, I somehow resented it. I didn't know this man, but I knew what would happen to me if I didn't obey the soldier's orders. The soldiers half dragged me to where the cross was. And for the first time, I looked directly into the face of this man called Jesus. And as I looked, I was startled because He was looking right at me. My eyes met his, and his eyes met mine. I've never seen eyes like his before. It was like he had known me all his life. He knew my thoughts and feelings. He knew everything about me. There was no bitterness or hatred. I sensed that this man who was going to be put to death had compassion for me, Simon. I've never had an encounter with anyone like that before. I haven't been the same since. This encounter with Jesus has changed my life forever. I bent down and picked up the cross. But I no longer felt that resentment. I actually counted it a privilege to carry the cross for this man called Jesus. I knew in my heart that he was innocent of the charges brought against him. I knew he had been falsely accused. Oh, thoughts kept racing through my mind. But I knew there was nothing I could do except carry this cross. A great multitude were following us to Calvary, many mocking and scoffing, but I noted some were weeping and recounting his praise. Those whom he had healed of various infirmities, and those whom he had raised from the dead, cried out through their anguish and their tears, demanding to know what Jesus had done to be treated so cruelly. Their voices were barely heard over the crowd. Only a few days before, some of the crowd had attended him with joyful hosannas and waving of palm branches as he rode triumphantly into Jerusalem. But many that had then shouted his praise because it was popular to do so now have joined this throng and helped swell the cry of, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" It was getting to the point I was no longer able to control my emotions. I knew that if I tried to run from the scene, the soldiers would beat me. Somehow, I was able to block out the shouting, the swearing, and pushing by keeping my eyes fixed on Jesus. With tears rolling down my face, I looked forward and I saw that we were coming close to that hill called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. I kept asking myself, why? Why does this man need to die? When we got to the place where they were going to crucify Jesus, I dropped the cross to the ground and started to half walk and half run away from the scene. I didn't want to see it. I wanted to get as far away from there as I possibly could. My body winced when I heard the sound of the hammers pounding against the spikes as they nailed him to the cross. I kept saying, why? Why are they hammering so hard, driving the spikes so deeply into the tender flesh of Jesus? I heard that thud. As they dropped the cross into the hole prepared for it. I stopped dead in my tracks. I stood motionless. Oh, it seemed like ages. I didn't want to look back, but I had to. I couldn't help myself. I had to turn and look to the cross. I knew in my heart that he should not be up there suffering the way he was. if anyone should have been on that cross, it should have been me. I felt so unclean, so dirty, so unholy. I just stood there and watched. The eyes of Jesus wandered over the multitude that had gathered together to witness his death. And he saw at the foot of the cross his mother. She had returned to the terrible scene, no longer able to remain away from her son. Oh, as a mother, how she longed to wipe his brow. The last lesson of Jesus was one of love. He looked at the grief-stricken face of his mother and said, "Woman, behold thy son." And to John he said, "Behold thy mother." John immediately removed the mother of Christ from the fearful scene of Calvary. The mission of Christ's earthly life was nearly accomplished. His tongue was parched, and he said, "I thirst." It was a sense of sin bringing the Father's wrath upon him as man's substitute that made the cup he drank so bitter and broke the heart of the Son of God. I heard this man called Jesus say, "Father, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing." I heard him cry out in agony, my God, why have you forsaken me?" It was midday, and the sky suddenly turned black, and the wind began to blow. And at that moment, Jesus laid his head upon his breast and died. The earth began to shake, and rocks split open. I thought for a moment that we were all going to die. Then it suddenly subsided. One of the men who was guarding Jesus was terrified, and I heard him say, Surely he was the Son of God. What did we do? We bartered for his clothing. We nailed him to the cross. What did we do?" It was the preparation day and nearing the Sabbath. Joseph went boldly to Pilate and begged before him the body of Jesus for burial. Gently and reverently they removed Jesus from the instrument of torture, their sympathetic tears falling fast as they looked upon his bruised and lacerated form, which they carefully bathed and cleansed from the stain of his blood. At the tomb they carefully straightened those mangled limbs and folded the bruised hands upon his pulseless breast. Then they saw a heavy stone rolled against the entrance. The stone was sealed, and soldiers were placed to guard the tomb. But all their plans and precautions only served to make the triumph of the resurrection even greater, and to more establish its truth. Death could hold dominion over him no longer. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, is risen. He is alive. I returned to my home, forgetting why I came to the city in the first place. I haven't been able to get the events of that day off my mind. Could he have been the Son of God? Was he the Messiah that the Jews had been looking for? Never before have I had an encounter with a man like I had that day. Yes, yes, he had to have been the Son of God. My body trembles to this day when I think that I, Simon, almost missed my opportunity to know Jesus. My 2 sons knew him, but I rejected him, choosing to go my own way. Friends, down through the ages as you hear my voice, do not neglect your opportunity to look to the cross and personally get to know this man, Jesus. As with me, your life will never be the same. Friends, again, I beg of you today, if you have not made the decision to place Jesus first in your life, don't put it off any longer. Look to the cross and accept Jesus. Jesus says, "Come unto me, all ye who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest."